Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another round of My Patriot Report Live. I am Rituan Hill, and I am with Mr. Walter Cotton III. Mr. Cotton, happy Friday, man. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you today?
Man, I am great, getting better and better.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, I'm feeling good. Congress back in session. They seem to have found their cool yones and voted to release the Epstein files. It seems like change is in the air, my friend.
Yeah, I laugh because I also was looking at a podcast and they were saying that some of the names were being scrubbed, but I'll leave that for somebody else to discuss. But what I do want to talk about is the National Defense Authorization Act and the veteran-owned small business gold standard that should be approved. We think is will be approved. AI also thinks it will be approved too this fiscal year in the National Defense Authorization Act. Could you give me your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are very simply that Congress would be making a ill-advised decision to not include the gold program for veteran-owned small businesses as a part of the FY26 Defense Authorization Act. And I'm so confident that Congress is going to do the right thing that I've gone into my pocket. I went to my philanthropic safe and opened it up and pulled out some money and put it on the table. And I've taken my own time and I have thrown it on the table in the form of me taking the position as the president of the Elite Disabled Veteran Network. So to say it succinctly, I am more than confident that Congress is going to approve the gold program for veteran-owned small businesses at the Department of Defense, finally fulfilling a vision that my good friend Bill Elmore has been trying to put in place for the past 20 years, right? Trying to level the playing field between our disabled veterans and our veteran-owned businesses, because he's long believed that this divide and conquer thing didn't work for our community. So long story short, I am so convinced that Congress is going to do the right thing that I've already started making the investment necessary to make sure that our veteran-owned businesses get the same advantages that I helped create for our service-disabled veteran businesses back in the day.
Indeed, indeed. Can you? I heard you say that you're going in your own pocket to support because of your belief that this will get passed. Can you elaborate on that? What is that offering exactly?
Okay, and do we have that slide? Can we bring that slide up? Let me see if I can. Do you have that slide? Well,
I don't have that slide. Yes.
You don't have that slide. I'm going to see if I can bring that slide up while we're talking. And so I made a offer to provide disabled veterans an opportunity to get an easy on-ramp to the GovCon space utilizing a strategy that I popularized. And instead of me looking all around trying to find it, I'll bring it up in another example. I want to talk directly into the camera. And many of you may or may not know that I developed what is considered the gold standard in GovCon training for disabled veterans, right? That's a $10,000 course, $10,000 value proposition. In honor of my good friend Bill Elmore, I saw the need to take that cost and cut it in half. So I talked to my vendors and I asked them if they would give our patriots a concession, and they said that they would. So for a period of time, they're giving me the ability to take their cost for some very sophisticated technology off the burden of that class, which allows me to cut the price of the class in half. And what I'm doing is I'm going into my own pocket and I'm taking an equivalent dollar that it would cost for the disabled veteran to take the class, and I'm sponsoring an at-risk veteran-owned business. I'm sponsoring an at-risk veteran-owned business because this is kind of my contribution to reducing the suicide, the veteran suicide epidemic. This is my contribution to bringing that number down. And I think that if we can distract our veterans with the hope of entrepreneurialism, that'll help. So to say it succinctly, as a result of some negotiations I've done with my vendors, we're taking a class that I created and we're making it available to those members that join the Elite Service Disabled Veteran Network at half price. And I'm taking out of my own pocket the dollars necessary to sponsor a veteran-owned small business to get them prepared to take advantage of the new goal at DoD.
And that sounds like a great opportunity for the veterans who are looking to break through in this contracting space, federal contracting space, that is.
Some people who've benefited from it would agree with you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How would you describe the current state of federal contracting ecosystem right now?
I would describe it in flux. Like it was together, and then this administration has made some recommendations that's caused the system to go into flux. And right now it's in transition and it's reforming itself. And we're trying to figure out, how it's going to ultimately congeal and come back together. And so right now, no one really knows where things are in the federal acquisition system. I mean, should I be on GSA schedule to make sure I have access because everything's going GSA schedule? Are there some new MSAs coming out that I need to get on, like SOUP or Alliant 3? I mean, what is the prospect for sole source contracting moving forward? Depending on what watering hole you go to today, depending on which way the wind blows, you're going to get a different perspective, right? Right now, the system is in flux, and that flex is being impacted by some unintended consequences, like the impact of the SBA secretary ordering an audit of the 8A program. Oh my God, did she really do that? And before the auditor has come in with an interim report, they've already suspended a tribal 8A. And that's motivated Treasury to say, hey, it looks kind of, if there's smoke, there's potentially fire. So now Treasury is doing an audit of all of its small disadvantaged business programs. And I heard that the Secretary of War, I'm going to be respectful, also is calling for a good close look at their 8A sole source contract award. So when you ask me the question, what is the state of the acquisition space in the federal environment? It's in a state of flex, and you have to be razor sharp and tiger tough as you're moving through this environment, because giants are being crushed. Giants are being crushed in this season, and not just because of the policy changes that are occurring. There are technological shifts that are going on that are taking industries that were required, right? They were foundational to transactions and eliminating them overnight. So right now, the smart money is keeping its eye on where things are moving to and trying to stay just ahead of the value migration in order to take maximum advantage of it.
Let's talk about it with the ATI suspension. I was reading on the Federal News Network that suspension happened unordinarily fast. Like they didn't have even a chance to rebuttal. Could you tell me how that process ordinarily works?
It ordinarily works the way it worked, right? They identified fraud and they stopped it immediately, right? Mm-hmm. And now to determine, what in the quagmire that is the ATI soup, what's good stuff and what's an accident and what's an innocent mistake, right? They'll go through that later. But right now they've got a preponderance of evidence that suggests that they have to stop the hemorrhaging, right? So I apologize. I got on my soapbox there. What was the question again?
My question was, how does that process ordinarily works? Because I read on the Federal News Network that it happened fast, like it was the
Yeah.
day after.
Well, and I think it happened in the order that it's supposed to happen. As I was trying to explain, as I forgot, once the government identifies fraud, they identify, bleeding, a fire, right? They do everything that they can to put it out. And when you have a environment or a climate like the one that we have, where efficiency is the order of the day, right? The elimination, the mitigation of fraud, waste, and abuse is the order of the day. Anything that smells, appears in that lane is going to get high levels of scrutiny. And anyone who is dyed in the wool, long in the tooth in the acquisition community know what is made up of our 8A program. They know that there's trouble under that hood. And so what has happened, you're going to see more of. You're going to see more defaulting to erring on the side of protection. So when the interim audit comes out, and I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to go out on the twig of high octane speculation. When the interim audit comes out, there'll be a minimum of 30 or 40 tribal concerns that will be immediately suspended because of behavior and action. And that immediate suspension is going to cause a tidal wave of novation of contracts to other vendors.
So what I'm hearing you say is, in the midst of chaos, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for somebody to for a new home for contracts to be placed in.
Absolutely. And as you asked in the outset, what's the condition of the acquisition space? And I said it's in a state of flex, right? But in that state of flex, right, opportunities are going to emerge like this one. And those that are agile enough will be able to vector in and capitalize, take advantage of it. And so in this particular instance, right, what you have is a situation, right? This is one that they're telegraphing, right? They told you this about to happen, right? They told you they're about to disrupt all of these 8A requirements because they see something, right? And they're going to be looking for a safe haven, right? A port that they can go ahead and move that stuff over to. Service disabled veterans are at the top of the pecking order. What does a service disabled veteran have to do in order to take advantage of this kind of an opportunity? Well, if I'm looking at it, if I'm advising my client, I'm telling my clients those are not going to be small business transactions, right? The ATI contracts were 100 million in contracts. Those are not going to be small business transactions. And therefore, if you are going to be effective in this season, you're going to have to become that oxymoron that Mr. Hill and I have been talking about in the last couple of shows. You're going to have to become a scalable, bigger small business. And if you're a scalable, bigger service disabled veteran-owned small business, soon veteran-owned small business, that's responsible and responsive, you have the greatest probability to pick up some of this fruit that's going to be thrusted on the ground as a result of this audit. So if you're paying attention to what we're saying, if you're smelling what we're cooking, we're saying this is the season for you to get your feces amalgamated, right? Get out of the mustard, get yourself so you can catch up, right? Retool your organization so you're not vectoring towards stuff that ain't going to be awarded. You're not wasting your time with RFIs that aren't ever going to happen. You're focusing on where the contracting opportunities are moving to. I would encourage you to join us at the Elite Service Disabled Veteran Network. I would encourage you to take advantage of the course that I put out there. It'll make you rich.
Yes, sir. You spoke about the big large prime contractors being disrupted in this space as well. And we often talk about small businesses. My question is, with the shrinkage of small businesses and the centralization of contracts, that means less opportunities, not just for small businesses, but for everybody as a whole. So could you explain how the centralization and the shrinkage of small businesses affect prime business, other than small business prime contractors?
Well, the centralization of contract activity in the federal government is a threat to our national security. I've said that before, and it's a threat to our national security because what it does is it consolidates along a oligopoly or monopolistic principle, right? Making us accountable to fewer choices, right? You got fewer winners and losers, and when you create a economy where you have organizations that are, not just too big to fail, they're too big to manage, they're able to impose price pressures on you. And so the question that you're asking is one that both large businesses and small businesses need to consider, right? The centralization of contracts makes us less safe because it puts the government in the position to pick winners and losers. And when you have the kind of wallet that the government has, right, those winners and losers traditionally are connected to, some type of graph, right? Whenever you consolidate that much, the opportunity for fraud, waste, and abuse grows exponentially. And so at the end of the day, the large businesses and the small businesses, I think, benefit by coming together and looking at the fact that our forefathers who saw fit to put a Small Business Act in place did that for a reason. They did that because in order for us to have a equitable, distribution of the taxpayers' dollars, we had to legislate it. It would be a mistake for us to go back to a place that we've been at before. And I'm going to say this until I turn blue in the face. Centralizing contracts makes the government less efficient, and it makes America less safe as a nation. We should stop it.
Is the decline opening up doors for veteran companies to scale faster? If it's less small businesses participating, does that mean it's essentially more opportunities for veterans to be able to grow faster because there's less competition?
No, I wouldn't see it that way. And when you ask the question why we have a 48% reduction in available small businesses in the federal space, a study needs to be done, right? I could give you anecdotal evidence as to why I think it's that way, but a study needs to be done to understand why 48% reduction, 48% of the businesses that were doing business or looking to do business with the largest customer in North America said, that's okay. No more. Right. We have to understand why that's the case, because that's telegraphing a symptom of a root cause problem that I think is going to ultimately come back and bite us as a nation.
Where do veteran-owned businesses add the most value in today's environment?
I think that the veteran-owned businesses add the greatest value in helping DoD innovate against the mission, right? And when I say DoD innovate against the mission, I'm not just talking about the warfighter mission, right? Supporting the munitions. I'm also talking about the reshoring of the manufacturing assets, right? The ensuring that we have throughput in supply chains that work in this nation. That's the greatest place that our veterans can make a contribution, because many of us during our service in that other nation, right, the armed forces, right, we worked with many elements of the logistics of the supply chain, right, that are required to support a community, support a society, support a nation. So we understand, some of the nuances that you could tweak the system with that would make it more efficient, right? So taking that ingenuity and bringing it back into the process of reshoring, revitalizing, only is going to put us as a nation in a position to take full advantage of that capability we invested in creating, right? We invested in creating the innovation that these servicemen and women have. They have know-how about systems, processes, and procedures that make things more efficient. So we as a nation benefit by making sure that him and her who bore the battle is participating in our reshoring process. And let me speak to him and her who bore the battle, because I've heard some people say that, veterans don't want to be entrepreneurs. My friend, if you are a disabled veteran, it is your duty as a patriot to get up off of that couch, put that VR headset down, and get out there and help your community revitalize itself. It is your duty to your family, with them throwing all of this generational wealth around, for you to capture as much of it as you can for your family, to make sure that up to 5 generations of your family don't have to work again. It is your duty to be an example of how America cares for him and her who bore the battle, so that future generations that are watching you can make the decision to raise their right hand and put their hand over their heart and serve in the defense of these United States of America. So our servicemen and women, our veterans, right? You all have an opportunity. You have an obligation also to get out of the mustard on this one, so we can help the nation catch up.
Indeed, indeed. Do you think agencies are becoming more aware of the reliability of that the SDVOSB population bring?
I hope they are, right? Right after over, $300 billion worth of successful performance against the mission, right? I hope that the agencies appreciate the kind of work, the kind of, performance that the veteran community delivers. And, I don't live in a panacea, right? I know all veterans aren't squeaky clean, right? We got some issues out there, but from the most part, right? We went from $750 million on average being awarded to veterans to over 19 billion on average annually being awarded to veterans, with very few protests, with very few bounce backs, with very few mission failures. And we were so successful at that Congress saw fit to increase our percentages just for the disabled veterans from 3% to 5%, right? So our veterans have demonstrated, our disabled veterans and some veterans demonstrated our ability to produce value for the agencies. And I think that our agencies understand that. I think that they acknowledge that. And now, right, and this is, an act of God, right? The creek rocked and the wind blew in the effort to bring acquisition into constitutional compliance, right? By dismantling DEI and pulling the race-based acquisitions out of the equation. And now, I understand that there's a good look that's being taken at the gender-based, right, preference. That is leaving us service disabled veterans as the undisturbed preference. And I think Congress, in their infinite wisdom, is doing that because Congress knows that we veterans come from every walk of life, right? We're women, we're men, we're brothers, we're uncles, we're fathers, we're sisters, we're Black, we're white, we're Hispanic. We come from every walk of life. And so if we want to have an economy that reflects America, let the veterans do it. Let the veterans do it.
Yes, sir.
Let the veterans do it.
Yes, sir. I agree with you. What, in your opinion, what holds many veteran-owned businesses back from scaling?
Ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Ignorance. And I would have been guilty of that same thing, because when I was coming into the acquisition, or should I say the contracting space, I went to the same sources that haven't changed, many of them, right? They're very rigid, that these veterans go to today, right? I went to what was at that time my PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center. I went to the Small Business Development Centers to try to learn everything that I could about how to do business with the federal government. And I kept getting the same old tried and true advising. And I would be willing to submit to you that they're still delivering this advising today. Son, first thing you got to do is you got to find a prime contractor. You got to become a subcontractor to that prime contractor. And eventually, right, you're going to get enough past performance to be able to go out and prime your own contract. Well, that advice was being delivered in a season where there were authorities on the book that allowed for joint venturing, that allowed preference owning organizations to dynamically engineer the capability and capacity that they needed to be contract viable, right? And so I, being the innovator that I was, right, read that, tried it, and successfully got my first contract without having to go through the subcontracting for 6 or 7 years and so on and so forth, right? And so the veterans today need to get right-minded guidance. They need to get the right-minded information on how they put themselves in a position to be viable in today's acquisition space. How they are viable not as subcontractors, not as agents or pass-throughs, but as prime contractors, right? That actually own the foundation of contracts that you can stack and build that generational wealth footing that we talked about. It's possible. It can be done. And if you're listening to people that are saying, well, you have to subcontract, you're listening to the wrong people, right? What you need to do is get rid of them zeros and get with these heroes.
Yes, sir. And well, my next question was, what was the biggest lie veteran-owned small businesses still believe about federal contracting?
What's the biggest lie that they believe? I think it's that subcontracting pathway. I think the biggest lie that they believe is that, you know, there isn't a strategic alliance pathway vis-a-vis joint venturing that allows them to dynamically enter the federal space. And they in many instances get seduced by strategies that are just dangerous and illegal, like the middleman strategy, because they want to take the easy path. They want to take the shortcut. Well, in government contracting, there are no shortcuts, right? Because we're supporting the federal government's mission. And so if you build a real enterprise, the government will reward you with real contracts. But if you don't have the wherewithal, I'm going to put this one in the middle here. You're over here. You don't have the wherewithal to build that real enterprise here. The government allows you to connect with an existing small business that has past performance, has capability and capacity, so that you can cross-pollinate their capability and capacity, and ultimately at the end of the relationship that you guys have, come out as a standalone enterprise that can support the government's mission. So my point very simply is that if you're not getting that kind of advising, that kind of guidance from the sources that you are working with, toot toot, coming through.
Yeah, that part. Do you think veterans just are thinking too small when it comes to the federal?
Absolutely. And I've seen it firsthand, right? I've seen the crumb snatchers running around at the conferences, going to the booths and things like that. And then I've seen the bellwethers sailing through the conference, right? You know, the chameleonaires, I like to call them, right? And those are the people that know how the game is played. And these are people that will PCS out of service. They'll jump in the federal contracting game. And 7-10 years after that, they're selling their business for a couple $100 million and they've gone fishing. That's the plan. That's the strategy. If you're not employing that kind of a system, if you're not experiencing that kind of an outcome, I don't want to make this an infomercial, right? But you should holler at your boy. You should holler at your boy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I think that's a good ending point right there. If you're a veteran, service disabled veteran, you need to get off the sideline. If you're doing the square wheel thing, you need to pivot, or you're going to be one of the victims in this environment that's shifting right now. So we'll drop the link below to reach out to Mr. Cotton if you want to be a part of the Elite SDVOSB network. I'm Ratwan Hill, and that is Mr. Walter Cotton III. Have a great weekend, guys. Until next time, we're out.